Hey guys, do you remember when I said this? Since we have Star Wars Battlefront 2 coming up, I am currently working on a history of Star Wars Battlefront video. And to make that video not too long, I will move a specific part of the game development into separate videos. And since we are here on the ESCalation channel, what other than cut content could it be? So welcome to the cut content of Star Wars Battlefront. Yeah, the unfinished script for the history of Battlefront is still laying around somewhere. But EA's Star Wars Battlefront 2 managed to completely kill my enthusiasm for the brand. Solo and Episode 8 managed to do the rest. I've been a little burned out on Star Wars, to be honest. But since it is the 4th of May, here's part 2 of the cut content of Star Wars Battlefront. Just because I do have some love left for the old classic games. I promised to take a look at cut vehicles, so that is exactly what we are going to do now. Battlefront introduced us to a variety of ground vehicles from the Star Wars universe. For example, this hover tank is amongst my absolute favorites. Here it is called the IFTX or IFTT, depending on whether it is an Imperial or Republican version. I really enjoy this vehicle, I find it incredibly cool. The Star Wars Battlefront design dossier speaks of a variety of ground and aerial units not seen in the final game, such as the Republican AT-XT, the all-terrain experimental transport, a predecessor to the AT-ST, just like the AT-RT is. And just like many other vehicles nowadays, it is not canon since Disney took over. This vehicle, the AT-XT, is mentioned in the leaked game design dossier from 2004 and uses a picture of an AT-ST as a placeholder. The next Republican vehicle that was supposed to be in the game is the SP-HAT, a heavy self-propelled laser artillery piece. Armor and health are described as very high, and speed and maneuverability as very low. This gigantic vehicle, known from Episode 2, was supposed to have one main gun position and 12 secondary gunners for point defense. It is ridiculously big.
All quadrants to Sector 515.
Let us now take a look at the Separatists' equipment. They were supposed to get the GAT or GAT, a very maneuverable medium hover tank with tremendous firepower. This cut Battlefront 1 vehicle is still in the game files and can be played on a test map which is compatible with Star Wars Battlefront 2, so you can just go ahead and download it. It is the Naboo Plains prototype map. Just like the Republican army, the Separatists were also supposed to get an artillery piece, the HAG or HAG. A very interesting piece of equipment described as follows. The HAG's long-range guided mortar is not useful at all in close quarters, but can be devastating from afar. Once the mortar is launched, the droid pilot can alter the mortar's trajectory and guide it to its target. A very interesting vehicle indeed, that presumably didn't go far in development since it uses a placeholder icon in the design dossier. Another cut vehicle is the MTT, a vehicle that can be found in several mods since its model was included in the game. Legend has it that the MTT can actually spawn on the Naboo Plains map since it was mentioned in the game's manual. I personally remember wondering where it was. If it was actually cut, well then it was cut very late in development since, well, it was printed in the game's manual. Let's make a jump forward in time and take a look at the Rebel Alliance. And start with something very big. The KHI Warhound Mark IV. Described as a combat vehicle rivaling the AT-AT, placeholder image in the design dossier shows a juggernaut. You know, that gigantic wheeled vehicle from Episode 3 and Rogue One, the one that crushed all the droids on Kashyyyk. Found that to be pretty awesome. It is possible that the Warhound is just an early name for it, or the Juggernaut was indeed just a placeholder. Anyhow, not much is known about the vehicle and just like with many other things in the design dossier, it was cut early on. On the Imperial side, we have more ground vehicles. So let's start with not really a vehicle, but well, Star Wars Battlefront was to feature rideable dewback lizards. These big beasts appear to be lumbering giants in Episode 4, but they were supposed to be fast and agile in Star Wars Battlefront, with light armor and little health. The next ground vehicle is the famous TIE Crawler, a somewhat obscure ground vehicle as it is essentially a tracked TIE fighter. This vehicle is actually pretty famous since it has been featured in several other video games and I think LEGO even made a model of it. Judging by the overall amount of cut content, it appears to be that the game developers put more focus on the Clone Wars because there's just more cut content from that era. And in the end, we will have a look at a vehicle cut from a rather neutral force, a speeder. The speeder appearing to be an alternative version of the speeder belonging to the Naboo security forces, similar to the speeder briefly seen during the street fighting scene of episode 1. By the way, this thing is called Nubian Speeder. When I hear the word Nubian, I always have to think of this guy, Watu, from episode 1.
Nubian! Not gonna be cheap, huh?
I like his voice. This concludes our look at cut ground vehicles from the first Star Wars Battlefront game. So, I suppose next up would be air and space combat units, a topic for next time. Do we have time for bonus meme cut content? Yes, we do! EA's Star Wars Battlefront 2, just like the one before, was a disappointment to me. With the first rebooted one, I didn't express this disappointment so profoundly, because the amazing visuals just wowed me. Star Wars video games never looked so good, but with Star Wars Battlefront 2 the stunning visuals were nothing new, and I remembered what I was missing. I missed the classic Conquest game mode. The thing that made Battlefront games so great to me was the fact that it combined the things I liked, the Battlefield gameplay formula with Star Wars, and EA's Battlefront just didn't do it for me. So when I saw this thing, this little leaked model, I got a bit excited again. Would we finally get something resembling the Conquest game mode? I just guess a lot of old fans would really love this. I am aware that many of today's gamers haven't even played the old Battlefront games, but I think the Conquest game mode is something everyone can enjoy. I mean, it works for Battlefield. And lo and behold, we got something resembling the Conquest game mode of the older games. This actually rekindled my interest in the game, somewhat. EA's Battlefront 2 still gives me a sour taste in my mouth when I think about all the microtransaction bullshit that went down. No denying that, this tainted the game for me forever. But at least now it features a game mode that I find mildly entertaining. It took DICE just over 4 years to implement a game mode into their rebooted franchise that I find engaging. But this wasn't all too surprising. Star Wars games tend to take a long while these days. Take a look at what came out when the prequels were around. 2005 was a great year for Star Wars. And now it takes ages for anything to come out. It took 4 years for a classic game mode that the old fans wished for since the very beginning to be implemented. But it is implemented in a way that is just barely good. It's not the Battlefield way, it's just okay. Alte 4 Games, a German YouTuber who some of you may know, had some interesting thoughts on it. The original Star Wars Battlefront games were clearly rip-offs of the Battlefield formula, and now the original Battlefield creators are working on it. He theorized that if they would do a completely faithful Star Wars Battlefield, as the original Battlefront games were attempting to do, then this new version of Star Wars Battlefront would massively outshine DICE's own brand, and they just cannot have that. It may not be the full reason why Battlefront games aren't as elaborate as Battlefield games nowadays, but it very well may be a contributing factor. So letting DICE develop the Star Wars Battlefront franchise may not have been a good choice after all, although most likely the bad decisions were made at a higher level, at EA, not necessarily DICE. Well, and I know, it has been quite a while since I lost interest in the series with the disappointing Star Wars Battlefront 2, but I wanted to uphold the little tradition of taking a look at a Star Wars game at least once a year. And I think this video counts too, even though the last 3 times it was a game review, of which I would say they are worth checking out, especially the Star Wars Bounty Hunter review. I freaking love that game. But maybe not as much as the first Star Wars Battlefront. This game always puts me in a super nostalgic mood, for the times I played this game with the PlayStation 2 on a 17-inch screen, which had messed up colors. Everything was a bit more green than it was supposed to be, and well, playing split screen on a 17-inch screen, okay, why am I actually nostalgic for it? This actually sucked. Anyways, special thanks goes out to all of our loyal supporters on Patreon, who of course got to see this video first. Until next time, have a nice day, and as always, goodbye and guten Tag. And since it's the 4th of May, live long and prosper.
Überlegener Verbündeter in unserem Einsatzgebiet.